All right, so in the previous video, we talked about water with irrigation, fertilizer, and how inorganic synthetic fertilizers are made. How you have to have sun, and how agriculture uses lots and lots of energy. Now, before we get to proper crops and look and try to figure out how we have been able to stay ahead of global population growth with agriculture, in the 1950s and 60s, especially in the 60s, people were really scared we were going to run out of food. It hasn't happened. As a matter of fact, we know from a previous chapter that the number of calories in agriculture per person, per capita, has increased rather than decreasing. So we've stayed ahead. We'll talk about that next. But before we get to that, one of the problems that we have in agriculture is pests and weeds. So this can be anything from a fungus, it can be an insect, it can be a competing weed type plant. And all of these, how do we deal with them? Poisons. We use poisons. They're sold under the name pesticide. So modern agriculture depends on poisons to control these things. And the use of these pesticides has skyrocketed since the 1950s. So I have a graph there which talks about the millions of pounds of pesticide that is used in agriculture, and it has skyrocketed from the 1950s. So we kind of went from the mom and pop farm where they had a few chickens, a few pigs, the milk cow, and then maybe an orchard, apple orchard or whatever, to these giant monoculture farms that we think of today. And how have they done it? It's through the use of these poisons. And the poisons, they've helped, and we have stayed ahead of global population growth of humans. But there are some problems that come from it. When I lived in West Tennessee, I lived in a small farming community near, like 10 miles from the school where I taught. And I had a farm behind me, a farm across the street on the other side of the road, and they used to use airplanes to spray these fields. And I would worry a little bit about whether I was a non-target species getting treated with the pesticide, because I was a non-target species. And the problem you have, thank God, it didn't kill me, but there are a lot of things that are not being targeted that are killed by the use of pesticides. And one of the things that can happen is something called resistance. I have it written here in big letters, resistance. And now what happens when you produce a resistant population is, we've talked about how within a population there's a variety of traits, right? I mean, if you look at the people in your class, look around. Oh yeah, you're by yourselves. But if you remember the class that we were sitting in, and you look around, it's a very different motley crew, right? Everyone is different there, right? And some might be more resistant. If we were being sprayed with some kind of a toxin, some of us might survive. Hopefully, some of us would survive, and then we probably would have lost our mates, right? So you'd pick somebody that survived, and you'd have babies with them instead of, whoever. But just go with me on this. So the resistant individuals would mate and produce a resistant baby. And so then the next time they came around to spray to kill the pest, they'd be resistant. So you'd have to put more of that poison on there to kill them. And then you'd have to say, well, let's scratch our heads. What can we do? Oh, we need to invent a new poison because they have become resistant. Well, this is what happens with bugs and with weeds and with other types of pests. So this is the problem. It's a continuous battle that's being fought on the agricultural front. It's a huge industry.